Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined as always by our fearless leader, the managing editor of Horns247, the one and only Taylor Estes. Taylor, happy March to you.
Happy March, Chip. How's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. I mean, what did Chris Beard call this? The best month of the year the other night. And we got all kinds of things going. Spring football is going to start in this month, 20 days from now. We'll be talking some football today, our interview with Cameron Dicker on the Flagship podcast. Everybody needs to check that out. He's one of two Longhorns at the NFL Combine this week. We'll get into that. Hudson Card, make or break spring for him. We'll get into that. Talk some Texas men's and women's basketball. Here we are. We're getting down to the nitty gritty, the last games of the season, Big 12 tournament seeding, all that. And Texas baseball continues to look like the number one team in college baseball. They're doing a little better than the Texas softball team right now, but we don't need to dwell on that. Taylor, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Chip. We have a lot to cover, but it's always an exciting time because I always feel like, when March hits us, it's like, once they changed the signing period to the early signing period, I feel like from like January through March, we're kind of like, oh, okay, what are we going to talk about? A little bit, even though there's things going on, but this is when things really ramp up. So this is an exciting time.
Well, and you mentioned the signing period, and this could be the month that Arch Manning takes his official visit to Texas.
Right. Yeah. Steve Wiltfong, he was on the 5-Minute Morning podcast, part of the 24/7 Sports Network with Blair and Gulo earlier today. We're recording on Wednesday, and he talked about the current situation with Arch Manning, Chip. And he mentioned that, Arch wants to finish up his high school basketball season, and then it's going to be hitting a lot of these places that are in his, top 6 right now of schools with Texas, Georgia, Ole Miss, LSU is in the mix now. Ole Miss, Alabama. I mean, there's a list there that's kind of growing a little bit, but he's expected to be taking some of those visits here once his basketball season wraps up. So going to be something to watch. I mean, it's going to be like the tour of Manning, right?
I mean, this is big time. This is all eyes. I mean, look, only Texas, when it comes to the quarterback position, can an official visit possibly overshadow spring football.
Right. Yeah.
Spring football is going to start on March 22nd. We're hearing Arch Manning could be in March 24th. And
it's his birthday too.
Well, yeah.
And I think it's actually his uncle Peyton Manning's birthday as well. I'm pretty sure we share the same birthday.
Hey, little trivia for your next tailgate right there.
Yeah.
Taylor, Peyton Manning share a birthday.
Possibly Arch Manning visit.
So big March coming your way. And, the NFL Combine, Taylor, we'll start there. And Pro Day, by the way, is March 10th. So, but only 2 Longhorns at the NFL Combine. We talk about the rebuild of Texas football, and one of the 2 at the NFL Combine this week is kicker Cameron Dicker, who we had a chance to talk to on the Flagship podcast interview earlier this week. Everybody should check that out because Dicker is a fascinating guy. I mean, how many people knew he grew up in China, was born in, Taylor knew. But how many people out there knew?
No, yeah.
He was born and raised in China until he was 11. And then he moves, over to Texas, plays at Lake Travis. And obviously everyone knows about his kicking and punting career at Texas, first team all Big 12 punter, Dicker the punter. But interesting stuff. I mean, he talks about everything from, playing for Tom Herman as compared when a coach who wouldn't even acknowledge the punter and kicker's name, to playing for Jeff Banks and Steve Sarkisian. Jeff Banks, a former punter, very hands-on and top-notch special teams coordinator. And then all the heroics that Cameron Dicker provided for Texas football, the last-second kick against Oklahoma, the game winners against Kansas State. And he even kind of talks about Ryan Buchevsky and his decision to enter the transfer portal. They're best friends. And he talks about the competition who's still on campus.
Right.
Will Stone, who he helped recruit to Texas from Austin Regents High School, and Isaac Pearson from Pro Kick Australia, who's the leading candidate to replace Dicker as the punter, as well as walk-ons Bert Auburn and Gabo Lozano. So it's definitely a flagship podcast you want to dig into, because Taylor, we've talked about this. Special teams were a plus for this 5-7 team in 2021, and now because Cameron Dicker's moving on, it becomes a question mark, and it's a significant question mark when you talk about a guy who can deliver a game-winning kick or help with field position in terms of his punting. It's hard to replace a 46.8 yard punting average.
Yeah, it is. And that was a really good interview. Cameron Dicker, he's a funny type of guy. I thought it was funny. I won't give away too much of the interview. One of the funnier parts of it, I mean, it was funny hearing him talk about, Tom Herman not calling him by name. And he joked, he's like, I mean, at the end of the day, like, kicker kind of sounds like Dicker, so I just pretended like he was saying my name. It was like, oh, thanks, coach. But the other part was when he talked about, Chip, you mentioned the 2019 season, the game-winning field goals against Kansas, and then he said, yeah, my whole, like, I wasn't, nervous or anything. My whole thought was like, I mean, we can't beat Kansas. We're not going to lose, or we can't lose to Kansas. We're not going to lose to them. And he's like, well, then I guess we did lose to them a few years later. But it was just funny to see his personality. I mean, I think everyone, he provided Texas Nation with one of the best gifts, I would say, in the history of Texas football, with his little nod thing to Joseph Osai before he hit that game winner against Oklahoma back in 2018. And I feel like that's kind of the persona that people have built up around Cameron Dicker. But, when you actually get to hear him speak more and open up, I mean, he's a very interesting guy. It's an interesting story. So definitely check that out. The interview we had with him from Monday. I'm thinking, Chip, we may need to try to work to get Josh Thompson then too. I mean, we got one of the two combine invites as a guest. I think Thompson may be the next one.
Yeah, maybe we get him after the combine to see how he thought it went. But yeah, good stuff there. And Josh Thompson, I mean, he's a big physical corner, could play safety, has played nickel. I mean, he can do it all.
Yeah.
And you're hoping that he tests really well, answers all the questions right, that his medical turns out right. Because if you talk to any player who's been to the NFL Combine, they say that really it's about the NFL trying to put you under duress from the beginning. Like, you go in for your medical, you have to wait. Sometimes you have to wait hours for your medical. Dan Neal, friend of the show and former All-American, two-time Super Bowl winner, played at Texas, obviously, on the offensive line, talked about the year that he went to the combine with Orlando Pace, who was projected to be the number one pick in the draft when Dan, was coming out. And Pace got so tired of waiting for the medical, he just left. He just left the combine. Was like, someone's going to pick me anyway. He went number one overall. Didn't hurt him at all.
I guess you can do that if that's the case, right?
Yeah, but they try to, they don't give the Wonderlic test anymore, but they're just trying to see what you're like under pressure, under duress. And so it'd be, and they always ask you totally bizarre questions like, are you a dog or a cat or all this stuff? I mean, it's like ridiculous stuff. So yeah, we need to get Josh Thompson on to talk about all that. And Taylor, when you look at Josh Thompson, a guy who had to wait his turn and then played, like we said, all kinds of different positions, he's a guy whose his best football may be ahead of him.
Right.
He had the big pick six against Texas Tech, and he made a lot of plays, obviously, on a defense that struggled. He was one of the bright spots. I think he and Anthony Cook. But only two players at the NFL Combine. The recruiting class of 2022, you hope, starts to turn that tide, because I mean, I'm looking back at that 2018 recruiting class that Cameron Dicker and Ryan Buchevsky were a part of. Josh Thompson was actually part of the 2017.
Yeah,
Um,
he committed to Charlie Strong.
yeah.
Yeah.
But there's no one left. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that because there are actually some from that 2018 class like Anthony Cook,
DeMarvion
uh,
Overshown.
DeMarvion Overshawn, Keandre Coburn, who are still on campus and will be for the 2022 season. But so many players are gone. So many players transferred out of the program. A couple left early. Joseph Osai, Caden Stearns are in the NFL now.
Brennan
But
Eagles too.
Brennan Eagles, who's now, I think he just got drafted by the Dallas USFL team.
Yeah, he's on the USFL or in the USFL. He should have never left early to begin with. But
Yeah, he went undrafted. Had a cup of coffee with the Cowboys. Now, then didn't get picked up again. Now he's in the USFL. We'll see if he can, you know, be a late bloomer because some of his issues at Texas and leaving early were self-inflicted.
mhm.
His academics weren't in great shape, and there was talk that maybe he left because his academics weren't going in the right direction. So you just hope that a player like that can figure it out fast enough and figure out how much of a business pro football is so that they, have a chance, because he's got to get that education if football's not going to work out. So it's, it's that time of year where the page turns in the NFL from the Rams Super Bowl win to who's coming out and who's going to make a difference in the NFL next year as a rookie. And so it's exciting times for guys like Cameron Dicker and Josh Thompson. And then at Pro Day on March 10th, let's see who can be that guy who, jumps off the screen, the Jeff Swaim, the Henry Meltons of the Pro Day, who, gosh, some of these guys end up, getting Trey Hopkins.
Yeah.
Started at center for the Bengals, went undrafted, and put up a good pro day at Texas, and got the attention of the NFL that way. So it's an exciting time for those guys.
It is for sure. And when you mentioned about Josh Thompson having the best football ahead of him, I totally agree with that, Chip. I think, if anything, if you learned anything about Josh Thompson during his time at Texas, is that he's a competitor, obviously, and that he's a team player. He's a team guy. He moved from corner to safety to back to corner to nickel, back to corner. I mean, he played all over, and he did it just to try to help out the team. And I always felt like Josh Thompson was the type of guy who never truly got the credit he deserved, especially last season. I mean, everyone was picking on, the fact that, or saying that Deshaun Jameson, for instance, like had a fall off type of year. And it's like, well, it's because people weren't targeting Josh Thompson's side of the field because he was playing so well. And people weren't talking about that. They were just talking about the negative, which is easy to do when there's a 5-7 season. Obviously, you kind of look at all of the negative. It's really hard to point through to the positives, but Josh Thompson definitely was one of the positives for Texas. And that's a guy that the Longhorns are definitely going to be missing in the secondary, and missing his leadership too, because he was one of the team captains for the 2021 season. He did have the possibility to come back for another year. I talked to some sources about after he announced his decision to enter the NFL draft, and one source told me that Josh probably would have come back had he not been invited to the Senior Bowl and then ultimately the Combine. If he missed out on either of those, he was probably going to come back for another year, but he got that invited to both. So that just goes to show what people in the NFL and the scouts do think of him. I mean, some Texas fans, I think you're going to miss him a lot next year. And he was kind of that under the radar guy that probably never got the credit he deserved, because he kind of was floating around, but obviously good enough to where he was invited to both of those, even though he has played all over the secondary, and as you mentioned, his best football may be ahead of him. So that's a good sign of what he brings. But now it's for Texas has to replace that, which is going to be a tough challenge, I think, Chip.
Yeah, and some of the positive feedback we've heard from the offseason workouts have been from the defensive back position: Terrence Brooks, Ryan Watts, and BJ Allen at safety, the true freshman early enrollee. So Texas in need of those guys to come on and make a difference. And I'll just say this: Marcus Wilkins is one of my favorite stories of a guy who got it going on pro day at Texas. Marcus Wilkins, I think, started one game at Texas. Was a special teams guy, but at pro day, he killed it. And so he comes out in 2002 and makes it as an undrafted free agent who started one game in college and ended up playing 6 years in the NFL. And so if you don't think pro day matters, I got another thing for you.
Yeah. Well, Henry Melton too. I mean, everybody really came out that year to watch Brian Orakpo. I mean, Brian Orakpo was the headliner, obviously. He was one of the first round draft picks in that 2009 NFL draft, I guess it was. But Henry showed up so big that what was he drafted, like 4th round or something like that? And I think earlier, prior to that, he was looking at a later draft or possibly undrafted free agent. So yeah, pro day matters for sure. And I'm like blanking on his name. There was a player that was a safety at Texas. Oh my goodness, I don't know what, but this
Earl
was
Thomas.
what?
Earl Thomas.
No. It was oh my gosh, it wasn't Adrian Phillips. It was oh my gosh, this is driving me nuts now.
Adrian Phillips is a good story too.
That's a good story too, but there was another one. Michael Thompson. That was another one. He was. I mean, I remember back then when he was going through workouts. I was joking with I was not. Another media member leaned over and was like, "Why is he just wasting our time?" And then he ends up being, I think, a 5th or 6th round draft pick because of his performance at pro day too. That was another kind of good story too. So yeah, a lot. It definitely matters a lot on the line for a lot of guys, and a lot of opportunity for ones that may be flying under the radar, at the next step of their career.
Well, and I apologize if you can hear some knocking in the background. There are some folks here doing some work on my house. So don't worry. No one's trying to break into my house or, trying to hurt me or anything like that. Don't fret about that. All right. So Taylor, UT basketball, they have the men have their last home game in the Irwin Center on Monday night against Baylor. And it was awesome. The energy was awesome. Now, let's be honest about the Irwin Center. No one likes the Irwin Center. Okay. Now, you may have graduated in the Irwin Center, so you have good memories of getting your diploma in the Irwin Center.
I did. Yep.
But the concerts, okay. See, Taylor has some good memories in the Irwin Center, but concerts, the acoustics, not good. Although I was asked what my 3 favorite events I ever saw at the Irwin Center, and I said Aerosmith, Paul McCartney, and Tom Petty 4 months before he died. And the acoustics were never good in the Irwin Center. And it's not a good shape for basketball. It's a big round arena, and a basketball court is a rectangle. You'd like the building to be a rectangle and like be right on top of the court. But anyway, Taylor, I mean, top 3 events at the Irwin Center for you before we plunge into UT basketball?
I can't even remember the last time I even went to a concert there.
See,
so
Taylor
I guess
didn't even want to go to concerts there.
One graduation, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so that's good. We have
Even
one
then, I didn't want
positive.
to walk. I was like, oh, I had to. My parents flew in from California, so I couldn't just be like, oh, I'm not walking. We're just gonna have a party.
Yeah. Yeah. You had to waste your whole morning, probably most of your day, sitting and watching other people walk across the stage. But so the Irwin Center last men's basketball game happens Monday night against Baylor. Baylor, number 3, defending national champion. Great headliner, marquee event to close down the Irwin Center. And Texas, with 6 minutes left, this is a tie game. And you're like, oh man, Texas is teaching them in terms of their physicality. They've been in this situation recently and won against Kansas. They've had close games against OU and West Virginia and pulled them out. You're thinking, what a win this would be to close down the building. And then Baylor makes all the plays down the stretch, and Texas can't get to the free throw line. I mean, Marcus Carr, Andrew Jones, 2 of their best drivers, not a single free throw attempt, and Baylor had guys in foul trouble, including Adam Flagler, their leading scorer, who had 4 fouls for the final 6:45 of the game, and Kendall Brown, who had 4 fouls for the last 10 minutes of the game. And so Texas ends up losing this game 68-61. It's one of those resume games where no one was expecting Texas to win, but if they could have won, it's a great resume win for the NCAA tournament committee to look at. But this was a good game. It was a good game. Texas played way better than they did in their first meeting when they got smoked 80-63 in Waco. Remember, that was the game where Beard sent all 5 starters out to answer for themselves and Courtney Ramey said, we were soft and we need to step on each other's toes and hold each other more accountable. And they have since then. So you saw progress, but they came up short, Taylor.
Yeah, and you would hope that with those many players on Baylor being in foul trouble that, Texas would try to force them to make a mistake. I mean, and it was weird, right? I mean, wasn't it kind of because Texas held the lead at halftime. I mean, it seemed like everything was kind of going in the Longhorns' favor. And then when it came down to it, it's like y'all had a chance to put this away literally by forcing them to foul you a lot. I mean, let's just be honest. And that just
because
didn't
Baylor
happen.
was only playing with 7 guys.
Yeah.
Remember, they don't have LJ Cryer. They don't have JTT anymore. They got a couple, their key guys out, injured, and you had guys in foul trouble. So it was a big opportunity.
It was. And now Texas does have another opportunity to end the regular season at Kansas team that just got upset by TCU, surprisingly. Actually, that happened Tuesday night. So this is going to be a big game. I'm not sure that I would want to be in Texas shoes going to Fog Allen Fieldhouse and facing a Kansas team that just got embarrassed in a 10-point loss, I think it was, to TCU. And then to wrap up the regular season, good luck.
What a way to close out the regular season. You get to be the senior night opponent for the top team in the Big 12. Great experience, great opportunity, as Chris Beard said on Monday night. It's a great opportunity. And it is, because look, Texas is going to make the NCAA tournament. He's talking about Texas being a contender to win the Big 12 tournament when they go off to Kansas City March 9th through the 12th. And so we'll see how this seeding plays out, because Texas right now, right in the mix for that 4 seed, which would, depending on how Kansas and Baylor finish up, you don't know who you're getting there. Texas beat Kansas in Austin, got swept by Baylor. So, look, the Big 12 is no joke. And you just mentioned TCU, and TCU's a team that's on the bubble. That win over Kansas probably helped them get in. So it's, exciting times. Since our last podcast, Texas also went up to West Virginia and won. And that was sort of the epitome of what Texas needed to do in the Baylor game. You had Timmy Allen relentlessly attacking the basket, getting fouled, going to the free throw line, made 12 of 14 free throws. And Texas won the game from the free throw line in the final minutes of that game on the road. Texas got up by 9. Then West Virginia came back, led by 10. Then Texas claws back into that game by attacking the basket and making free throws. And they end up holding on and winning 82-81 on the road. West Virginia was a gut check win. And you've seen Marcus Carr, relentlessly attack when they played TCU. TCU was up in that game. Texas came back, won it from the free throw line. I just kept waiting for Texas to do that against Baylor. It didn't happen. But again, Baylor, number 3 team in the country, defending national champ. Credit to Scott Drew. This may be Scott Drew's best coaching job at Baylor. He lost 4 starters from the national championship team, including Davion Mitchell, who was an absolute assassin. And then, he brings in Akinjo from Arizona, who, wow, I mean, if Marcus Carr wants to know what he's up against in the NBA, he got a good look at it. And going up against a Ncaa who just got wherever he wanted to go against Marcus Carr, and Marcus Carr couldn't get anywhere against Ncaa. It was that was a wake up call, I think, for a lot of people. But let's see where Texas goes. Now they've had this newfound, killer instinct or toughness since that Baylor loss in Waco. Let's see if they can bounce back and get going here in March. I know Chris Beard seems to be trying to manifest that into existence.
Yeah. I'm curious, Chip, how many Big 12 teams do you think will make the NCAA tournament?
Probably less than people think. I mean,
Half?
I think it's 5.
You think so?
Yeah.
Who do you think it will be?
I mean, I think it'll be Kansas, Baylor,
Texas.
Texas, and Texas Tech, obviously, and then TCU.
What about Iowa State?
I think they got exposed
Mm-hmm.
down the stretch, but maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's pretty impressive the Big 12 has 10 teams. So
Right.
if they do get 6 in, by just the percentage, that's probably goes to show that it arguably is the toughest conference, I think, this season in college basketball, which I don't know if a lot of people expected that.
I think people thought West Virginia and OU would be better, and
Mhm.
West Virginia was a big disappointment. OU under Porter Moser, first-year coach, up and down. And Oklahoma State, who made the tournament last year, is ineligible for postseason play because of NCAA sanctions dating back to the Brad Underwood era. But Taylor, UT women's basketball, real quick. Kudos to Texas fans. They showed up for Texas's home win over TCU after Vic Schaefer said he was really disappointed and frustrated with them averaging only 2,600 fans. More than 4,000 fans came out to see them wax TCU, and the Texas women have won 6 in a row. We're recording on Wednesday. They're getting ready to play at Kansas in a really interesting game because Kansas is the surprise team of the season in the Big 12 in women's basketball. They were picked to finish last, and right now they're still in contention to finish 4th. I mean, this is a big game for Texas in terms of seeding going into the Big 12 tournament because the top 2 teams in the Big 12 for the women are Baylor, who Texas has got swept by, and Iowa State, who Texas swept.
Right.
So obviously Texas would like to be the 3rd seed instead of the 4th seed and avoid getting in the same half as Baylor. So we'll see how that goes. But the Texas women playing great and surging at the right time. So and Texas baseball, Taylor, big weekend coming up. Texas beats Sam Houston State. Andre Duplantier goes a career high 6 innings, gives up 1 hit and gave up 1 run after giving up a leadoff double in the 2nd inning. And then he had a, little issue. A grounder moved that runner to 2nd. Then he got called for a balk. The runner moved to 3rd. And then a fielder's choice brought that run in. But that was it. And, Texas pitching just continues to look fantastic. And Andre Duplantier is a guy who, people were saying he could battle Tanner Witt for that Sunday starter role. So you want to continue to see Duplantier look good because if anything happens injury-wise, you got to have a guy who can come in and be a weekend guy. Andre Duplantier looking like he can handle it. And because he got through that 2nd inning, and I think he threw 78 pitches through 6 innings, and he had 3 1-2-3 innings, looked good. And the bats, against Sam Houston State came through 10-2 win. And now they head to Houston, Minute Maid Park to take on Tennessee, LSU, and UCLA, 3 baseball powers. And this will be the first, Alabama's a team on the rise, but this will be a bigger test for the Longhorns.
Yeah, it will be, especially the first game, I think, against Tennessee. I mean, if you look at the current stats in college baseball, Tennessee basically leads pretty much every offensive category that you can think of. I mean, I believe they're what are they like number one
Number
in,
one in scoring,
in
home
home runs,
runs,
doubles,
on base
slugging
percentage.
percentage. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it's a lot, and then
Now
there's
it helps they played Iona, who's like one of the worst
true.
baseball teams in history, and
Yeah,
they won one game like 29-0,
okay, so that makes sense.
22-1. So they're averaging like 16 runs per game right now,
Yeah,
which
I
is
think it's
ridiculous.
like 15.1 scoring or scores per game, I think is what it is, but yeah, I mean, this is still a test. I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, this Tennessee team, they were in Omaha last
Yep.
year,
Yep.
and, that it's as you mentioned, the other teams that they are gonna be playing, in LSU and UCLA, I mean, those are perennial college baseball, I wouldn't say powerhouses, but strength. They're, a big name in college baseball for the history of those programs too. So, and if you go back to last season when Texas played in this tournament, Texas got swept by all of the SEC teams that they ended up playing. Wasn't it the same tournament, right? It was
Oh, yeah.
they played
Well, that
like
one was in Arlington.
oh, that was in Arlington. That's right. I was thinking that was in Houston, but yeah, I mean, still, this will be probably one of the toughest challenges, and it starts on Friday against number 17 ranked Tennessee. But if you look at Texas currently leads the country in with I think it's a .67 ERA as a team, and then behind them is Tennessee. I don't have their numbers for their ERA off the top of my head, but
Yeah, they're top 3.
yeah, so, yeah, number Tennessee has a .9 ERA, and they're second behind Texas.
And
So
I'll say this about the win over the sweep of Alabama. They won game 1, 1-0,
mhm,
and Pete Hansen, whose ERA is still zeros, went 6 innings and didn't even get the win because it was still 0-0 when he left. And so Travis Staley ended up coming in and getting the win. And Travis Staley's looked great in a relief role, the top reliever coming out of the pen, the way a role that Tanner Witt filled last year. And then in game 2, they win it 2-0 with Tristan Stevens on the mound. And Stevens' ERA is still zeros.
yeah.
And, clutch, gutsy performances, great defense from Texas. Silas Ardwan, 3 for 3 and gunning attempted steals at second. Got another one against Sam Houston State last night. And you just like how these guys have looked.
Mhm.
And so this weekend, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is, and it's never a bad thing if you start the season with your Friday night and Saturday starter with 0 ERA, in 2 games that they've played, and they've played 11 innings and 12 innings. It's not like they have zero ERA after being pulled after 2, they're averaging about 6 innings per game so far, in their starts so far. I mean, that's you win with pitching. Let's be honest. You win with pitching. And if you look at like the Texas Rangers, for instance, I mean, when Nolan Ryan was involved with the organization, there was such an emphasis on the pitching staff because he knows what he's doing. And then they, fire him and let the people in the main office that are the suits make the calls. And they've been terrible since. I mean, pitching is so crucial in any level of baseball, high school, college, pros, you name it. But Texas is off to a really good start, and you hope that whoever the Sunday starter ends up being, whether it's Tanner Witt, whether it's somebody else, continues that trend. But this is, I mean, you win a series with if you win the first 2 games, and if your starting pitchers are Tristan Stevens and Pete Hansen, you probably have a pretty good chance of winning the 2 games of series to at least start.
Yeah, Hansen with 8 strikeouts in his start against Alabama, and Tanner Witt 9 strikeouts.
Mhm.
He's got a 1.8 ERA,
Yeah.
and he's a guy who will, he is a power pitcher. So, I mean, he is coming after you. He's trying to throw hard and just beat you down, kind of like the way Ty Madden did it. So you love to have that guy as your Sunday guy because you've just faced Hansen and a power sinker baller, and Tristan Stevens, and then you're going to get the heat from Tanner Witt on Sunday. That's a pretty good combo. And the Bats came alive in that third game against Alabama, 6-1 win. So Taylor, we will. You ready for some love it or leave it? We got to give some love because the Texas men's and women's swimming and men's and women's track teams both swept at the Big 12 championships. Track, obviously, the indoor championships, but the Texas men's swimming team is number one. No shocker.
Oh, yeah, surprise, surprise.
Eddie Reese going for his 16th national championship, probably going to win it. And Carol Capitani, who's dramatically improved the women's swim program. They're number 2 in the country. They handle their business. And Edric Florial, the coach of the both track teams, he has the number 1 team in the country in the Texas women, the number 3 team in the country with the Texas men. So kudos to those teams because they were dominant last weekend.
Yeah,
all right.
They usually are. I mean, those programs are usually pretty dominant year in and year out, and that's continued. So definitely kudos to them. But you ready for some love it or leave it?
I'm ready. You ready?
Yeah, let's go take a really quick break here, but stick around because we have some more football talk, some more basketball talk, and baseball talk, actually. Trifecta and love it or leave it this week. So stay tuned. We will be right back. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will roll on here. Chip, let's get some love it or leave it going.
Okay, real quick, Taylor, I can't leave out our girl, Sophia Simpson, the freshman pitcher for the softball team. She threw her first collegiate no-hitter.
Oh, yes.
For the Longhorns and snapped a 6-game losing streak for the Longhorns. Sophia Simpson, I think I mentioned last week, starting to look like the number 1 pitcher for the Longhorns as a true freshman. So you can't miss her. She wears number 99. And
oh my God.
she's got like 5 different pitches. So kudos to Sophia Simpson for that no-hitter. Okay, now I'm ready for some love it or leave it.
My first question for you is love it or leave it. This is a make or break spring for Hudson Card.
You know, I'm gonna love this because even though it could be neck and neck between he and Quinn Ewers in the spring, Hudson Card needs to be way ahead. I mean, Hudson Card needs to have a lights out spring and put all of his experience, all 1 year of experience in the Steve Sarkisian offense to work because it's not only make or break for Hudson Card, the quality of the quarterback play in the spring is going to directly impact the confidence of the rest of this football team. You know, when Vince Young walked out on the field, every player, whether he was a defensive lineman or a corner or a safety, felt a little better, a little faster, a little stronger because he was playing with Vince Young, even though they didn't even, they weren't on the field at the same time. That's how big of an impact the quarterback position can have. And Hudson Card needs to grab this opportunity and he needs to just say, it's my time. It's my show. It's, no ifs, ands, or buts. So from that standpoint, I'm going to love this, Taylor, because obviously he's in a little bit of an underdog role. He's kind of in the role Casey Thompson was in last year when everyone was saying Hudson Card is the guy. Now Hudson Card is, trying to fend off the guy that everybody thinks is going to be the starter in Quinn Ewers. So, the battle's not over at the end of spring, but I'm going to love this for all those reasons. How about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of torn a little bit because I don't necessarily I wouldn't be surprised at the end of spring if there is no clear answer at quarterback yet. And that's not me saying that I'm questioning either one of these guys' talent level or anything along those lines. I just think that it's a long ways until even fall camp, and a long ways till the start of the season. And while everything is, I would probably, I'm going to leave it. I think so, because I would say more so Hudson Card probably has the most to gain out of this spring, but I wouldn't call it a make or break because I just would not be surprised if the quarterback position is not clear cut ever, Quinn Ewers was perfect type of thing, came in, took over. I do, would not surprise me if Quinn Ewers does start next year or anything along. I'm not trying to say like the opposite, but I don't necessarily think it's make or break because I'd be a little surprised if Steve Sarkisian was going to call the quarterback battle at the end of spring. So where it could be make or break, I would say would be more so if Quinn Ewers starts, rolling a little bit more and more, and Hudson Card kind of starts, trailing behind him further and further. It may be a make or break spring in him staying at Texas or not. I think that may be more so than, he's either has to prove it now or he never will type of situation. So I'm gonna leave it, but I will say that I do think Hudson Card has the most to gain with a good spring. The one thing though, Chip, we talked about the women's basketball attendance last week, the game against TCU, the home game, and how the fans showed out. Well, the Texas football players showed up too, and the players that showed up that Texas football was promoting being at the game were DeMarvion Overshawn, Xavier Worthy, Jake Majors, and Quinn Ewers. We haven't seen Hudson Card at all, it seems. I know it's just a social media thing, but still, social media is planned by like organizations. It's not random. It's not some things that they're just going to randomly do things. No, you have an idea and a plan for how you want to implement social media and do your posts on social media, especially if you're a football program, like especially the magnitude of Texas. And there's been a lot of public posts about Quinn Ewers. Where's Hudson Card? I do think that Hudson Card really needs to step up and probably be more of, if he really wants to, get the team on his side, he's got to stand up and be that leader. And I feel like we're seeing a lot more about Quinn Ewers than we are Hudson Card, and Quinn Ewers has yet to put on a Texas jersey. So that's I think, if this should be a wake up call, if you're Hudson Card, it should be a wake up call that I need to make my presence more, known, not just among the team, but publicly too.
And kudos to Taylor, because I think it was Taylor's. She said here on this Flagship podcast that the other sports need to promote women's basketball to get students out to the game, and that appears to have happened. And I will say this: I don't think Hudson Card can win the job in the spring, but I think he can lose it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
If he is, if he hasn't improved his pocket presence, his awareness, his ability to, stay calm in the pocket and read what he needs to read, and then handle adversity by being what you just said, that leader, because Hudson is quiet. And so when things are going badly and he's just sitting on the bench, the team needs that quarterback position to be reassuring. Otherwise, everything slumps. So I think Hudson has to show that in the spring, that he's improved that part of the game, or I think Steve Sarkisian's going to start looking for ways to get Quinn Ewers into that starting role. So anyway, that's a good hot topic that I'm sure people will be discussing. All right. Love it or leave it. Number
situation at Texas. People are going to talk about it. Come on.
Amazing.
That doesn't ever happen, right? All right. My second one for you, Chip, is love it or leave it. There were more positives than negatives to take away from Texas' 68-61 loss to Baylor.
You know what? I'm going to leave this for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Where was the attack mode from the guards and even from Timmy Allen, who, ended up being the leading scorer in the game. And, he needed to go at Kendall Brown. He needed to go at Adam Flagler as well. But Andrew Jones, who's been so good for Texas, had 3 straight 20-point games and did not have his 3-point shot going. He was 0 of 7 and he was 0 of 5 in the second half. At some point, he's got to make that, he's got to say, okay, 3-pointer's not my friend tonight. I'm going to go get my points in the paint. I'm going to attack them. And that was disappointing for me just because Andrew Jones has been so good. In that win over TCU, he and Marcus Carr both were 7 of 8 from the free throw line, and Andrew Jones all of those free throw attempts came in the second half when Texas needed him to attack and get to the free throw line. So I'm going to leave this because I felt like Texas didn't quite show all the lessons that they've been learning here, since that Baylor loss and, the first one in Waco. And I think they left a little something on the table in that game. So I'm going to leave this. Taylor, how about you?
I think I'm gonna have to leave it too. I'm the type that it's hard for me to take a lot of positives away from a loss. You take more lessons, I feel like, more so than not. And that's probably just from my upbringing. I mean, there are definitely positives to take away from losses. However, I grew up with a dad who said, you show me a good loser and I'll show you who the loser is. And so it's kind of like that's my mentality a little bit. And so I'm gonna have to leave it. I think that the biggest thing, Chip, was the lack of finish. And as you mentioned, Andrew Jones finishes the game with 6 points when he, has been very capable of putting up double-digit numbers there. And the fact that the team could not force Baylor to foul them when there are three guys that had 4 fouls. It's like, come on. And that to me is just, it should be inexcusable a little bit. So there were definitely some positives. You saw a fight, you saw them really attack them early on in the game, but I've got to see it for a whole game. I feel like this Texas basketball team is kind of playing games a little like how Tom Herman's teams played football games, where it's like it's a little too close for comfort, guys. Like maybe break away a little bit, or extend the lead substantially instead of just keeping it between a 3 to 5 point lead in some of these games, especially against a number 3 ranked team. You got to strike when the iron's hot, and I feel like Texas got the iron hot and then put it in cold water in the second half. So I'm gonna have to leave it too.
Well, speaking of lessons learned, Texas, when they played Kansas the first time, Courtney Ramey was sort of the hero of the game because he face guarded, Ajabi, the Kansas's leading scorer. And, can he do it again in Fog Allen Fieldhouse? That's going to be a tall order. So be watching for that when the Longhorns get senior night in Lawrence. All right.
That's your favorite place to go, isn't it?
Oh, so good.
Yeah. Pretty
So
much.
good. And I'll say Texas Tech, that atmosphere against Texas this year was even better. But Fog Allen Fieldhouse is the best because all the history. It's a museum. It literally is a museum. Like James Naismith founded basketball. You walk through the halls of Fog Allen Fieldhouse, you're in a museum. It's awesome the way they've done it. So yeah.
Rock Chalk Jayhawk will give you chills in your bones, basically.
Oh, yeah. That's your death sentence.
Mm-hmm.
That's your last rites when they start chanting Rock Chalk Jayhawk in the final minute of the game.
I've never been to a basketball game there. I've been to football games there, and it's a glorified Texas high school football stadium pretty much. Yeah. But I would like to go to a basketball game. I have not had the chance to do that. But I've heard
Chalk Jayhawk KU. When you hear that, it's over.
Yeah, exactly.
You've lost.
The Undertaker is coming to take your body.
That's right. The Undertaker.
All right, Chip. My final love it or leave it for you is we will learn a lot about who Texas baseball is as a team this weekend in Houston. Love it or leave it.
I'm going to leave this because I feel like I know what Texas is already. And I don't mean to sound like, what a, homer. And are you kidding me? They haven't played anyone. No. The stuff that Pete Hansen throws, the stuff that Tristan Stevens throws, and Tanner Witt, and you got Travis Staley coming out of the pen. You got, Andre Duplantier in an emergency. I just feel like I know. Now, I think Texas can really put some confidence in the tank with a strong performance this weekend. If they can handle Tennessee, handle LSU, handle UCLA, Arkansas has already lost. They were the number 2 team. They lost to Northern Illinois or Southern Illinois, one of the Illinois. and Texas is just, they've had a couple close calls. I mean, heck, they had a 5-4 game against A&M Corpus Christi with 3 errors and 4 unearned runs. So, I get it. It's but I'm going to leave this, Taylor. I feel like I know what Texas baseball is. I just feel like this is an opportunity for them to put some confidence in the tank. How about you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you. I think I'm going to leave it because for the same reasons. I think that you, we know what the strength of this team is. It's the pitching staff, it's the defense, and those are crucial things. Now, obviously, it helps Texas resume, and I think helps anybody that are potentially doubting them. Like, oh, okay, let's see what happens when they face like tougher competition. But Texas is still number one in the country. They're undefeated. And even when they did have that close game against Texas A&M Corpus Christi, they did pull through. So I'm going to have to leave it. I think we do know at this point who Texas baseball is, but it doesn't mean that they can go into Houston and, get like beat. That would be, more so than anything. I think that Texas just really needs to keep doing what they're doing. And their I think talent's going to speak for itself. Yeah, I don't want to repeat everything you just said. So I'm just going to agree. I agree with everything that you said. I'm going to leave it and say, we know who this Texas baseball team is. Let's see it continue this way.
Well, and there's film now, right? I mean, the Tennessee, LSU, UCLA, they've seen Pete Hansen now twice. They've seen Tristan Stevens twice. They've seen Tanner Witt twice. They know tendencies and that's going to be fun to see, because the thing about Hansen is he changes the speed of his changeup. He'll throw kind of a cutter, and then he'll throw just a, kind of a off speed changeup, and it comes out of the same slot, and you can't, by the time you try to figure it out, it's too late. And that's where Hansen is he's so technical, and we talked about it last week. David Pierce called him a young Andy Pettit. I mean, Pierce remembers Andy Pettit from Deer Creek and playing at San Jack in their northern campus in Houston back when David Pierce was with Wayne Graham at Rice. So it's that's his teammates call him baby Greg Maddux. So look, they're going to be bad performances somewhere along the way. Hansen's going to have a clunker. Tristan Stevens going to have a clunker. Tanner Witt's going to have a clunker. You just I have way more confidence in those guys to bounce back from those kinds of performances, or maybe not have them, just based on what they're throwing.
Yeah.
So, all right, good stuff, everybody. Make sure you check out the Cameron Dicker interview, the Flagship podcast from Monday. And thanks for listening. You know what I mean? Yeah. So for Taylor Estes, I'm Chip Brown. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. And until then, stay safe and keep the faith.